Welcome here, full story. The fire crackled softly, casting warm shadows across the room. The scent of cinnamon and pine lingered in the air, mixing with the rich, sweet aroma of my cocoa. Tiny marshmallows floated on the surface, melting just enough to leave streaks of creamy white. For the first time in years, Christmas Eve was peaceful. No shouting, no chaos, just the hum of holiday lights and the steady rhythm of snow tapping against the window. Then the front door slammed open so hard it thought the hinges might give way. I turned my head slowly, already knowing who it was before I saw him. Ethan stood in the doorway, breath heavy. His face flushed either from the cold or pure frustration. His coat hung open, his fists clenched at his sides behind him. Rachel hovered, just inside the threshold, arms folded tightly, her expression unreadable. But tense, we'd be celebrating here from now? On Ethan declared, his voice like a gavel striking wood. I took another slow sip of my cocoa, savoring the warmth as the weight of his words. Set then. I leaned back, exhaling softly. I hope you brought a tent? The color drained from his face. Rachel sucked in a sharp breath as if bracing for the inevitable. I set my mug down on the edible. Something tells me this isn't a friendly Christmas visit. Ethan's jaw tightened. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair and looked away for a moment before finally meeting my eyes. I walked in on Dad, he said, his voice dropping to something almost hollow. With another woman in our house on Christmas Eve, the room fell into a heavy silence, save for the faint pop of the firewood shifting in the hearth. Rachel rubbed her temples, eyes shut, as if fighting off a migraine. Mom lost it. Ethan continued shaking his head. She was screaming, throwing things. Dad just stood there making excuses like he could talk his way out of it. And then his voice cracked. He swallowed hard before forcing out the words, "She kicked us all out. Even me told me I had to choose, either I stood by her or I went with him." My stomach nodded. Our mother never made empty threats. Ethan let out a bitter laugh, the sound devoid of humor. So yeah, we grabbed what we could and left. Figured we'd come here since you're the only one with enough space. I rubbed my temple, trying to process it all. And you didn't think to call first? Ethan threw his hands up. I was kinda dealing with a family crisis, man. Rachel finally spoke, her voice steadier than I expected. Look, we'll sleep on the floor if we have to. She exhaled sharply, composing herself. My wallet was in my bag. My bag was in the living room, and I wasn't about to walk back in there while your mom was throwing wine glasses at your dad's head. I closed my eyes for a moment, then sighed. All right, fine. But you're explaining this to my wife. Rachel sagged in relief, and Ethan gave a small nod, but just as I was about to shut the door. Headlights carved through the dark. Caroled into my driveway, tires crunching over fresh snow. I already knew who it was before she even stepped out. Mom, she didn't bother turning off the engine. Her grip on the steering wheel was so tight, I could see the whiteness of her knuckles from where I stood. Her eyes were swollen, her face streaked with smudged mascara, her breathing heavy from either the cold or sheer exhaustion. She still wore the same dress from dinner, but now a red stain marred the fabric. Wine, most likely, maybe something worse. Her gaze flicked from Ethan to Rachel, then finally landed on me. You going to let me in? She asked, voice raw, or do I have to stand out here all night without a word? I stepped aside. She swept past Ethan without so much as a glance, her heels clicking against the hard wood. Rachel remained frozen near the door, watching as Mom made a beeline for the kitchen. I expected her to grab a bottle of wine, but instead she reached for the carton of orange juice, her fingers trembling as she poured herself a glass. Ethan leaned against the counter, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Mom, what the hell is going on? She let out a dry, humorless laugh. Oh, you mean, besides your father screwing some 20-year-old in my house, besides my own son standing there like a lost puppy while I threw him out with the rest of the garbage. Ethan flinched like she had slapped him. Mom, she raised a hand, cutting him off. Save it. I don't want to hear your excuses. You stood there. Ethan, you watched. You didn't say a damn thing. his fists clenched at his sides. I was in shock. Phew, I didn't know what to do. You should have done something, she snapped, slamming her palm against the counter so hard. The juice glass wobbled. You should have told him what a pathetic, disgusting excuse for a man he is. Ethan's breath came sharp through his nose. I did. His voice was tight. After you threw us out. He told him exactly what I thought of him, that he destroyed everything, that I'd never forgive him. Mom stared at him for a long moment, her chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. Then slowly, she turned her gaze to me and you. Her voice had lost some of its sharpness, but the weight of her accusations still hung in the air. Did you know I froze? Not the details, not who it was with, not that it would happen tonight of all nights, but I had seen the signs, the late-night phone calls, the sudden business trips. The way he started wearing cologne he never used before, the way he and Mom barely spoke anymore. I had my suspicions. And I had said nothing, standing there in my kitchen under the weight of her gaze. He felt guilt settled deep. In my bones, but the words wouldn't come. The silence after Mom's words was worse than any shouting match. It pressed against my chest, heavy and suffocating, making it impossible to breathe. Then she laughed, a brittle, hollow sound. Nothing like the warm, familiar laugh I had grown up hearing. She shook her head, looking at me. As if I were a stranger, of course, she murmured bitterly. Of course. You knew Ethan? Head snapped toward me, his eyes narrowing. Wait. You knew. Rachel sucked in a sharp breath beside him. Oh God, swallowed hard. I didn't know for sure, but you thought it was possible. Mom said, her voice now cold enough to cut through steel. I rubbed the back of my neck, the weight of their stares bearing down on me. Yeah, silence thick in the air, cloying and unbearable then. To my surprise, Mom smiled, not a real smile, just a small, bitter curve of her lips, the kind of smile people wear when they've lost too much to care anymore, you know. What's funny, she said, her voice eerily calm. I was going to come here and tell you both that I was done, that I was leaving him, that I wasn't going to waste another second of my life on that man. She grabbed her purse from the counter and squared her shoulders. But now I realize I don't have anyone left in this family. Can trust the word struck harder then. And he slapped Mom. Come on, Ethan started stepping forward. That's not fair. She whirled on him, fire, and her eyes not fair. You think any of this is fair? I gave that man 35 years of my life, Ethan. I built a home with him. I raised 2 boys with him, and now on Christmas Eve, if and out, I've been made a fool of, and my own sons didn't even warn me. Her voice cracked. And for the first time I saw her not as my mother, not as the woman who always had an answer, but as someone completely, utterly broken. She turned toward the door, gripping her purse like it was the only thing keeping her standing. Rachel spoke, her voice gentle. Where are you going? Mom reached for the doorknob without looking. Back, anywhere but here, and then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, and for a long moment none of us moved. The only sound was the steady hum of the heater and the quiet crackling of the fireplace. Then Ethan swore under his breath and grabbed his coat. I'm going after her. Rachel turned to him sharply. Ethan, it's freezing out there. I don't care. He shot back, already heading toward the door. She shouldn't be alone right now. I exhale, grubbing my face with both hands. She's not thinking straight. She just needs time to cool down. Ethan rounded on me, his face still flushed with anger. Time for what to decide whether or not she ever wants to talk to us again. You heard her? She doesn't trust us anymore. He met his glare. And what do you want me, Toto? Ethan? I can't change the past. I didn't know for sure, and even if I did, what was I supposed to do? Tell her Andrew and everything even sooner? Ethan let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Oh yeah, God forbid we ruined Christmas a few months earlier, Rachel. Step between us, her arms, outstretched guys. Stop, this isn't helping. Ethan shook his head and turned back toward the door. I'm going after her before anyone could stop him. He stormed, out the wind slamming the door shut behind him. I let out a long, shaky breath, pressing my fingers to my temples. "This is a disaster." Rachel stood with her arms crossed, watching me closely. "You really didn't think to tell anyone? Not even Ethan?" I met her gaze, exhaustion weighing down on me like a lead blanket. Would it have changed anything? She didn't answer. Then my phone buzzed. I pulled it from my pocket, frowning at the screen. The name made my stomach twist. "Dad?" Rachel saw it, too. Her expression hardened. "You're not seriously going to answer that, are you?" I hesitated then. Against my better judgment, I swiped to accept the call. Hello, silence. Then my father's voice came through low horror and unsteady shekgon. I stiffened. What he exhaled, the breath shaky. "Your mother, she left? She took the car and just drove off." A pit formed in my stomach. Rachel's eyes widened. "What is it?" I held up a hand, my grip on the phone tightening. "What do you mean? She left? I mean, she packed a bag, grabbed the keys, and took off." Dad said, his voice raw. "She didn't say where she was going, just that she was done, that she never wanted to see me again." I swallowed hard. Dad let out a bitter laugh. "I deserve that, don't I?" I said, "Nothing, listen." He continued, his voice quieter now, almost pleading. "I know, I messed up, I know. I don't deserve anything from her, but she's out there, and I don't know where she went, and it's Christmas Eve. I need to know. She's safe." The weight in my chest grew. Heavier for all the pain he had caused, for all the things he had done. He was still my father, and Mom. Mom was out there, alone in the middle of the night, and no one knew where. I had a choice to make, and I knew no matter what, nothing would ever be the same again. The moment I ended the call, I already knew I was making a mistake, but it was too late to back out. "Now," Rachel's gaze was sharp, "you're really going to help him?" I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Rachel, Mom is out there alone at night in the middle of winter. I don't give a damn about Dad right now. I just need to find her." She crossed her arms. "And if he shows up, if he tries to talk his way back in." I had no answer for that. Rachel let out a slow breath. "Fine, but I'm coming with you." We grabbed our coats and stepped outside. The cold hit like a slap, the icy air biting at my skin. Ethan was already gone, his footprints trailing into the night. I tried calling him, no answer. I tried calling Mom straight to voicemail. I muttered a curse under my breath. Where the hell did they go? Rachel shivered beside me. "Where would your mom go when she's upset?" I thought for a moment. Then it hit me, the lake house. The drive was silent, the roads empty except for the occasional passing car. It wasn't far, 20 minutes maybe, but in this weather it felt like an eternity. I gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, my mind raced. Through every possibility, what if she wasn't there? What if she was what if Ethan found her first? What if Dad did? Rachel finally broke the silence. "What are you going to say to her?" I shook my head. "I don't know, I just want her to know she's not alone." Rachel studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Good." We turned onto the long winding road that led to the lake house. The snow-covered trees cast eerie shadows in the headlights. As we got closer, I spotted 2 cars already parked outside Ethan's and Mom's. Rachel and he exchanged a glance before stepping into the cold. The wind howled around us as we made our way to the door. The lights were on inside. I knocked. No answer. I knocked, again harder this time. The door swung open. Ethan stood in the doorway, his face flushed, whether from the cold or from whatever heated argument had just unfolded. I couldn't tell. His eyes were wild, his jaw tight. "She's inside," he muttered, brushing past him. I stepped into the cabin. The warmth inside was a dark contrast to the freezing air outside, but it did little to ease the tension gripping my chest. Mom sat curled in the couch, wrapped in an old faded blanket. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to little more than embers, casting a dim, flickering glow across her face. She looked small, fragile, lost. A lump rose in my throat. "Mom?" I said softly. She didn't look up. You shouldn't have come." I hesitated, then sank into the chair across from her. "Neither should you," she let out a weak laugh. But there was no humor in it, only exhaustion, only pain. I just needed to get away. I glanced at Ethan, searching for answers. He sighed, rubbing his face. "She won't come home. She says she's done." Rachel, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. "Can you blame her?" Ethan shot her a sharp look, but didn't argue. I turned back to Mom. "Where will you go for the first time?" Since I'd arrived, she met my eyes. Her gaze was raw, tired. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just know I can't stay there anymore." A heavy silence settled between us, thick with unspoken words. Then, outside, the crunch of tires over snow made my stomach drop. We all knew who it was before we even saw him. The front door swung open, and there he stood, Dad. But he wasn't the same man. I remembered the easy charm, the confidence that had always been his shield. It was gone. His coat was dusted with snow. His shoulders hunched as if he had aged years in a single night. His eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, searched the room before landing on Mom. She stiffened. Ethan took a step closer to her as if ready to shield her if necessary. Rachel remained still, her expression unreadable. Dad's voice was quiet. "Can we talk, Mom?" Let out a brittle, humorless laugh. "Now you want to talk?" He swallowed hard. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. You're damn right you don't." Ethan snapped, his voice shaking with fury. Dad turned to him. "I understand. If you hate me, both of you, but this isn't about me. It's about her." His gazer turned to Mom. "I just needed to see you, to make sure you're okay." Mom's hands clenched the edges of the blanket, her knuckles white. "You don't get to do this? Robert, you don't get to act like the concerned husband now. Not after what you did." Dad's face twisted with guilt. "I know," he exhaled sharply, running a hand through his graying hair. "I ruined everything. I betrayed you. I hurt you, and I'll never be able to take it back." Mom's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Why, she whispered just one word, but it carried more weight than any shouting match ever could. Dad looked away, jaw clenched tight. "I don't know." Ethan let out a bitter scoff. Dad's shoulders sagged. "I wish I had some grand excuse, something that would make sense. But the truth is, I was selfish, I was stupid, and I destroyed the one thing that actually mattered." Mom sucked in ashicky breath. "Did you love her?" Dad flinched, as if the question physically struck him. No, her lower lip trembled. Then why was she worth throwing away? 5 years. His face crumpled. She wasn't. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Rachel shifted uncomfortably. Ethan turned his gaze to the dying fire. Mom wiped at her eyes, sniffling. "You need to leave." Dad hesitated, as if he wanted to say something more. But then he nodded, slowly, defeatedly. Before stepping back into the cold, he turned to Ethan and me. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I know I don't deserve to ask for anything, but I hope one day you'll understand." Ethan's expression was stone. "I won't." Dad looked at me. I opened my mouth. Maybe to respond, maybe just to breathe. But now words came out. He nodded like he already knew my answer, then turned and walked out into the night, the sound of his car starting, the tires crunching over the snow, the engine fading into the distance. We listened to it all in silence. Mom let out a breath she had been holding for too long. Her whole body shook from the weight of it. Rachel moved, first settling beside her on the couch, gently squeezing her hand. Ethan stood near the fireplace, staring at the embers, his fists clenched and unclenched at his sides. I sat in my chair, staring at the floor, trying to process what had just happened. None of us said much that night. We stayed at the lake house, lost in our own thoughts. The quiet ruin of what used to be a family. By morning, the world outside was still and white. Mom moved through the kitchen, brewing coffee, the scent curling through the air like something familiar, something almost normal. Ethan and I sat at the table, sipping in silence. She joined us, wrapping her hands around her mug then. After a long pause, she exhaled. "I'm going. To file for divorce." Ethan nodded good. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. "What do you need from—" Mom's smile was sad, but real. Just to know I'm not alone. And she wasn't. None of us were. Christmas was different. That year, no big family dinner. No presents under the same tree. No pretending that everything was perfect, but somehow, despite everything, it felt real. And maybe that was enough.